Higher pressure comes from the Biden administration in an attempt to crack down on cybercrime. And the leaders of Iowa and Illinois this week make very different moves when it comes to requiring vaccines against COVID-19. That's the ground we'll cover this morning with Iowa Republican Party Chair Jeff Kaufman and Democratic political consultant Porter McNeil. Great to see you both as always. Let's get right to it and start with Iowa and Illinois. Both states continue to take very different approaches to the pandemic. Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds and Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker seem to be at opposite ends of the spectrum, whether it's business lockdowns, mask requirements, or school restrictions. Now, here's how they differ this week. Reynolds says she intends to have Iowa join a lawsuit challenging the COVID-19 vaccine requirement for healthcare employees. Pritzker signed an amendment to the healthcare right of conscience law. Democrats maintain it was being abused by anti-vaxxers to avoid the state's mandate. This change in the law intends to bolster companies' ability to require their employees to get vaccinated while maintaining medical and religious exemptions only when they are legitimate. Now, I maintain that both governors are doing what they believe is right. And we'll give more time to this topic, of course, and pick up with Reynolds' point of view. Why wouldn't everyone who sees a doctor, nurse at an office, or in the hospital want that assurance that their medical provider won't infect them? Jeff?
Well, I think that you're exactly right. We see two approaches to the same problem. I'm not sure that any one side can claim that science is 100% on their side, or that in some way that one side is right, one side is wrong. But I think what we're talking about is walking that line, the same line that we've been walking through the pandemic for years now, between personal freedom, the individual choice to make a personal decision, and the health and safety of people. And I think Kim Reynolds has walked that line. There was a bill that was passed a couple of weeks ago in the Iowa legislature, and it was a strong bipartisan bill in terms of making sure that religious waivers are continued to be granted. So this is not necessarily Republican versus Democrat, at least in Iowa.
But what about just having that assurance as a patient, Jeff? That just strictly for health care, Jeff?
I think we're looking at the professionality of the healthcare professional. I mean, we have in this particular country, in this locale, if we don't trust our healthcare provider, if we don't like the particular rules and regulations in a hospital, we can go some other place. And so I think we can have freedom without a mandate. And I think we can do that in a healthcare setting as well.
Well, but it's likely that information wouldn't be made public whether someone is vaccinated or not. Porter, your take on Governor Reynolds' position there?
Well, I think Jeff points out two different strategies. One that follows adhering to public health more strictly. That's the Illinois approach. And then in Iowa, less so. I grew up the son of a dentist. I believe in health care, public health. I'm glad that we raised the issue of freedom. John Kennedy once said that we need to promote the rights of all to be free. We need to redefine freedom as well. Freedom from living in a society that where we have a pandemic where 750,000 people have perished. In Illinois, I think most parents are happy their kids are getting vaccinated. They're happy they're back to school, and they're willing to do some good for the collective good, and the collective good of all, that promotes freedom for all as well.
Let me get into
I think it's a balancing act, but that's where I come down on the Illinois approach.
Well, let me get to Pritzker's actions here, because how much do you think people are abusing the medical or religious exemption? And won't people still be able to find another loophole around the vaccine requirement, Porter?
I think this law was passed to close a small loophole, a small group that are anti-vaxxers in Illinois, and they were invoking that exemption. That exemption passed in 1988 to protect doctors and nurses from engaging in medical procedures like abortions, which they disagreed morally with. So what Pritzker is saying is, let's not mix this law with anti-vaxxers, and let's protect employers who want to just implement COVID requirements, and therefore let's have a healthier, safer community. And I think that's what that law is meant to.
Jeff, do you see Pritzker's actions as significant?
I see them as what you would expect. I mean, like I said, this isn't just a Republican Democratic issue. We're talking about a Chicago politician, big government, versus in the case of Kim Reynolds, a small town Iowa governor, and I think there's a difference here in terms of what we will tolerate in terms of a mandate. I would guess that what Pritzker is seeing some religious exemptions as not valid. My response to that is that's not his call. And so I think what Republicans and Democrats did together in the Iowa State House 2 weeks ago, I think, is to make sure that if people have a religious exemption, that religious exemption is going to be accepted by businesses and by governmental entities that want to mandate. So I actually see this as two-edged. I think this is I think we are looking at the health and safety of individuals, but at the same time we're respecting one of the fundamental tenets of the Constitution, which is the First Amendment and the ability to have these kind of religious exemptions.
So where do you think
this is a slippery slope, I'm afraid?
Where do you think this is all going to end? Are we just going to have two? Because it doesn't seem to be. You have the left and you have the right, and both sides just don't seem to want to come to that. You're talking about the bipartisanship in Iowa, but nationally we're not seeing that, certainly. So where is this going to play out? Porter, I'll give you first crack.
Well, first of all, I just want to correct Jeff. In Illinois, there's still a religious exemption in that amendment. So
that is true, and that's what I mentioned in my intro. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. You know, I think you just have two different CEOs. One in a state, as I mentioned earlier, that is putting the public health ahead of every other issue, and that's Illinois. And right now, we have fewer per 100,000 incoming daily COVID patients than Iowa. There's a difference. I know there are a lot of factors, but I believe that the Pritzker approach, generally speaking, has been more productive for lowering the number of COVID patients. And again, 770,000 Americans have perished, more than all wars combined. I think we need to continue to be vigilant about it until we are really free from this pandemic. That's true freedom.
Jeff, really quickly, because I want to move on to our next topic. Just give me like 15 seconds, because I think you guys are basically making the same point over and over again.
We are. I mean, I would disagree respectfully with Porter in terms of Kim Reynolds' priorities. I think she is putting health and safety paramount, but I don't think she's going to play games like Pritzker is going to with what a real religious exemption is. And I really believe you can have your cake and eat it too here on such a very personal decision as whether you put a needle in your arm.
We are tight on this topic, tight on time again with this discussion as well. So we're going to move the rest of this conversation online and a web extra at ourquadcities.com. Both of you stand by.